So let's start this session of panel discussion. It's the eighth panel discussion that we are organizing since we started in spring 2022 with the support of Regional Cooperation Council. Then we continued with the support of the Association for the support of civil society of Albania and also other organizations that were supporting, that were somehow complementing the support. And the last session, which was in Tirana, it was on site. It was also with the support of the National Library and of the Open Society Foundation. Now, this one is again due to the support of the Albanian Agency for the Support of Civil Society, and also due to the very valuable cooperation of AIESEC, Association Internationale des Étudiants de Sciences Économiques et Commerce, which is an international association. The Albanian branch is helping us, and especially with the public that they are securing for us. I want to thank them again. This is an association, although it is students of economic and commerce, it is an association very committed to intercultural dialogue. And that's why they are interested in this project that we are having. Now, the title of this session is Education, Equality of Opportunities, and the Future of European Union membership. So it is about the social justice, for which the education is an important factor, and also it is related to the perspective of our countries, of Albania as well as other countries of Western Balkans. The panelists we have today are two distinguished academicians. Let me introduce them, although I suppose that those who are following us here know already their profiles. I have to stress, to highlight some of their elements of their profile for those who will be following us later in when we will disseminate this this session through the visual platforms by internet. Just a moment, Aladdin, are you recording this?
Yes, we already started.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So let me introduce first the two panelists. One of them is Eda Gemi, a political sociologist, specialist in migration, among other things, because she has a multifaceted profile and formation. She's, among other things, head of Department of Law in New York University in Tirana. She's senior researcher in the European University Institute in Florence. So she has also a lot of experience in education. And also she's an author of many publications, among which a book published by Oxford University. The other panelist is Nas Vega. He is from Kosovo, living and teaching in Albania since 17 years, if I'm not wrong. And he's a lecturer at the University of Tirana and doctorated in doctoral studies in the United Kingdom. He has accomplished. He is involved in many European and other international projects. Let me mention now one which is, so besides his experience and his knowledge about the education and its role. Now, among these projects, let me mention one in which he is currently working. It is in Kukas in northeastern Albania. It is funded by the United Kingdom so that young people there in this region should not leave the country and go elsewhere, but to find opportunities to work there and do things there in this region, so that it not remain marginalized. Now I will leave the floor to the panelists. Then afterwards, as always, there will be questions and answers, dialogue with the public. Now I leave the floor first to Eda Gemi. Please, Eda.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for your invitation. It's a great pleasure for me to join you in this very, very interesting and timely initiative via, your program and platform. So indeed, I'm very honored to share my view on education and equality or inequality with you and, of course, the rest of the audience. As a political sociologist, I would like to start with definitions. How do you understand education? Sorry, I'm a little bit cold, where difference between education and schooling actually stands. And then to see how actually we relate or correlate education with social mobility, with equality versus inequality, how actually we make sense of education as a key component, as a key human right. And of course, then I will switch a little bit my narrative to actually what is happening in Albania, and mostly to the fact that Albania is actually witnessing a suffering, very deep brain drain, which means that actually, our education and schooling system is suffering a lot. And then I will conclude with some key findings generated by the European Commission report on Albania for 2022. So let's start now with education. So what is education? How we define education? First of all, we all know, I guess, I hope, I assume that education is a social institution which promotes and enables the transmission not only of knowledge, but also of skills across generations. And of course, this is done most commonly through compulsory schooling. However, as I mentioned before, there is a distinction between education and schooling. While education can be defined as a social institution, which enables and promotes acquisition of skills, knowledge, and the broadening of personal horizons, schooling, on the other hand, is the formal process through which certain types of knowledge and skills are delivered via a pre-designed curriculum. And of course, as we know, it is compulsory up to a certain age. Nowadays, today, actually, increasingly mandatory education is being extended to college and even actually university level. Indeed, to go back in time and in a retrospective, let's say, way, before the late 18th century, education in schools was actually a private matter. And only the wealthiest families could afford an education for their children. Throughout the 19th and into the 20th century, compulsory state education systems were introduced as the need for literacy and numeracy among workers grew in industrial workplaces and services, which means that compulsory education is a modern let's say, phenomenon, which is actually identified or equalized with capitalism and modernity. For instance, in the United Kingdom, the Elementary Act was introduced in 1880, which made school compulsory for everyone. In the United States, education was made compulsory between 1852 and 1917. And in Australia, this happened between 1830 and 1870. Indeed, in the beginning, there was significant resistance to compulsory and universal education. Because why? Because of the very, very deep stratification, social stratification. Was believed that educating the poor would lead to, let's say, the revolution, to whatever revolution, which means the collapse of whatever status quo as it was perceived that time. More recent research actually tend to focus on the role of education and schooling in cultural reproduction, the generational transmission of cultural values, norms, and experience, and of course through the mechanisms and policies that this is achieved, which means that we have not only schooling, I mean education and schooling, but also how, schooling, I mean education and schooling is actually part of the cultural reproduction. If we try to actually embark on a more theoretical journey, actually education is seen as a key agent of socialization. Why? Because it is believed that education instills in children society's common values which sustain the social solidarity. According to Emil Durkheim, for instance, the focus was on moral guidelines and mutual responsibility. Why? Because actually this helped to mitigate the kind of competitive individualism in the name of social solidarity. But industrial society, as we have seen, education had another function and still have another function in teaching the skills needed to take up increasingly specialized occupational role, which could no actually longer be learned within the close circle of family. Another functionalist theorist, Talcott Parson, on the same, let's say, in the same vein with Durkheim, see education again as a key agent of socialization. But actually, the key function, according to Talcott Parson, is that education instilled to the individuals the essential value of achievement, often via competitive examination and assessment. And of course, this is very crucial because actually the individual, it's actually out of the, let's say, the close circle of whatever family, and actually the people, individuals, could achieve their positions on the basis of ability and merit rather than based on class, gender, or ethnicity. Of course, from a Marxist point of view, education is seen, and schooling, of course, is believed to reproduce social inequalities rather than helping to equalize life opportunities, or equal opportunities as we see, as we name it today. So actually what Marxist scholars supported is that education, as of course, again, an agent of socialization, trains children to become the right type of worker for capitalism. According to other scholars, there is a correspondence between the routines and structures of school life and the routine and structure of working life. So actually what they supported is that school not only provide students with the right knowledge and skills to be productive future workers, but also train children in personality, in their social skills, in their personal appearance, in self-presentation, and social class identification. So later on, especially I'm talking about new Marxists, or as it is called, new sociology of education, it was emphasized that socially constructed nature of the curriculum, of school curriculum, is a result or actually aim to reproduce power relation that actually benefit the state. Why that? Because according to this, let's say, school of thoughts, there is a hidden curriculum in school, in education, which train children to accept the status quo of how the world actually is. And of course, they supported that this hidden curricula is not only learned or taught through the lessons, through the formal schooling themselves, but also through this, let's say, as architecture of school, the discipline within the school, how the use of language actually is projected, about the narratives within the school, or even when it comes to dress code. For instance, we all know that till recently, till now, there are schools where the use of uniform is mandatory. So according to this approach, school, it's not liberating or creating equal opportunities for children, but instead is reproducing this vicious circle of, let's say, social structure. So it's a power relation, let's say, phenomenon. In order not to go in depth of whatever theoretical, let's say, approaches, I'd like to highlight two elements which are very crucial in our debate about education and equality. First of all, education, apart from a key agent of sociology, is seen as a key variable of social mobility. What is social mobility? It refers to the social or to the change in social status of individuals in a specific set of periods, which means that from an intergenerational perspective, young, for instance, individual improve their social status in terms of their income, professional standing, and social class position relative to their actually parents. This is a more functional approach in terms of the connection between social mobility and education. On the other hand, sociologists, the critical part of sociological, let's say, approach on education is that actually education is not exactly a vehicle for social mobility. Why? Because according to numbers and data and statistics of the subject, working class children tend to do worse in education than their middle class counterparts without being less intelligent than their, let's say, fellows. So the question still remains, why then do working class children generally achieve lower grades and have a lower attendance, for instance, even at, let's say, public or state-running schools? Sociologists support that this is happening because the myth or the very idea of meritocracy is just a myth. There are other, on the same subject, on social mobility, I mean, there are other scholars that are talking about social Darwinism or social Darwinism, or where, according to this approach, inequalities are justified as a natural result of meritocracy. And of course, you know that social Darwinism is a borrowed term from Charles Darwin natural selection theory, the survival of the fittest. So other radical, even more leftist approaches on how education and schooling system are reproducing inequalities instead of equality. For instance, radical philosopher Ivan Illich argued that societies need to move away from compulsory education altogether, a process that he called deschooling. According to Illich, actually what schooling, formal schooling, is doing is eroding people's, individuals' capacity for creativity and self-reliance. He argued further that compulsory education indoctrinated children into an acritical acceptance of the dominant social structure through messages and ideologies hidden in school curricula. See here the very interesting difference, fundamental difference between education as let's say, the value of enlightenment, with schooling as a social structure, part of social institutions. So according to Illich, compulsory, he actually supported or suggested to replace compulsory school education with peer-to-peer creative learning models, based on which children use technology to connect with others and learn the material most relevant to them in most appropriate way, which is partly the case of Finnish, let's say, successful educational system, partly, not completely. On the other hand, it's interesting to bring into discussion the very, let's say, idea of globalization. So school is not only, let's say, locally part of the system, but it's also a global, let's say, phenomenon in terms of interconnectedness between different systems of schooling, which is the case of European Union. So that's why I'm drawing some parallel between how education and schooling actually are understood from more theoretical perspective, with the issue of this debate today, how was the impact of education and equality in EU membership. For instance, we have in, it's not, of course, it's not only EU, it's part of OECD, the PISA system that actually measure the outcome of education through a standardized system of examination, evaluation, and assessments of both curricula and individuals, of children or students or pupils in our case. So talking about globalization, we see schooling today as a transnational in how the children, both the system and the children, are assessed and measured between countries. Even if we want to actually make more or endorse a more critical approach, we can actually bring into the discussion the world system theory of Immanuel Wallerstein about how actually we have this global stratification in terms of education. What does it mean? Social stratification of labor market and consequently of educational or schooling system. For instance, we have countries, for instance, in Asia, there are, let's say, offering their IT experts for the global labor market, actually. So the education system, the schooling system, the curricula is actually designed in order to produce and reproduce experts that are going to be, let's say, to fulfill whatever needs in global market. This is called world system theory. Of course, there are economic aspects, but I'm talking about only a labor market and education. So when it comes to education and equality in a more specific way, of course, they are interconnected concepts, as we have seen so far. First, it starts with access to education. So, and here we can actually highlight two elements of access to education: the gender equality and socioeconomic status, as we have seen so far. Second is quality of education, which means that equality in educational resources, and of course in addressing whatever needs of marginalized social groups or groups with whatever disabilities. Third, education vis-a-vis, I mean, equality as empowerment and opportunities, which means that skill development based on equality education equips individuals with the skills and knowledge that are necessary for personal and professional development, which on the other hand could contribute to greater equality in opportunities. And of course, education, always seen from empowerment and opportunity perspective, is able to break the vicious circle of poverty. Why? Because access to education, equality of opportunities in education is often a key factor in, as I mentioned, breaking the cycle of poverty. Why? Because actually can enable individuals to improve their social mobility, to improve their social economic status. Another element, the fourth one of education and equality, is social equality in terms of cultural sensitivity, in promoting diverse cultures, reducing discrimination, and of course, at the same time, promoting social justice. Why? Because education can empower individuals to advocate for social justice, which means that they are actually able or intelligent enough to challenge let's say, the perpetuate system of inequality or inequalities. We have already seen the global perspective of education, and of course, the fact that the access to education is not only restricted to whatever age. We're now talking about for lifelong learning, which promotes learning opportunities during the entire life, in life for adults equally. And of course, education through research can enable us to measure and address whatever disparities. So actually, all in all, we have seen that education is a very powerful tool, probably the key tool, one of the key tools for promoting equality on various fronts, but mostly when it comes to gender, socioeconomic status, and cultural diversity. As I mentioned at the beginning of this, let's say, intervention, education is a key human right. Actually, education is a tool for personal development, empowerment, and advancement of society. And the key aspects of the right to education are actually enshrined in Universal Declaration for Human Rights, Article 26, in International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights of 1966, Convention on the Rights of the Child, 1989, non-discrimination and equality principles, compulsory free education, and so on and so forth. So I'd like to close this, let's say, overview of, first of all, definitions on what is educational schooling, what are the main theoretical schools from functionalist point of view and Marxist point of view. What does it mean? What's the importance of education vis-a-vis equality and human rights? And now let's say change the tableau by focusing on the case of Albania. I'd like to actually illustrate what is happening in Albania vis-a-vis education with the last numbers of Instat that were published in 2021. So actually, we see from the Instat statistics that we have a huge drop, demographic drop decrease of population in Albania, and actually the most, let's say, crucial, a central part is emigration, and mostly immigration or migration of most active, let's say, part of our population. And this is interesting. Why? Because it's not only numbers of migrants or emigrants, but actually if we correlate or correspond or create this bridge between the fact that we have 150% increase of Albanians leaving the country for educational reasons, and if we correspond this number with unemployment, we see that the number of people, of individuals age 15 to 24 reach 27.1%. So it's not only leaving the country for better education, but actually the country does not offer the proper, let's say, opportunities when it comes to the labor market. And this is actually illustrated by the fact that almost 27% of young people are declared to be unemployed. If we broaden, let's say, the perspective and put it in a more regional, let's say, level, we'll see, for instance, that Albania is actually it's a first country, or the country with the most highest levels of migration in the Western Balkans. And immigration for study reasons, comparing statistic from 2013-2019, increased by 150%. And the destination countries probably for young people that are leaving for education reason are Austria, United States, Italy. Actually, the reasons mostly, I mean, apart from education, the reason why we have this, let's say, so deep problem in terms of brain drain, first of all, is socioeconomic instability. As we have seen, high unemployment rates, low wages, and weak education outcomes. And from a more anecdotal perspective, you all can agree that actually the system of education in Albania is more like a market-oriented, let's say, tertiary. I'm talking about university education, tertiary education, and less, let's say, affiliated or subscribed to European Union principles of free of charge education for all. And if we go back to the report that was actually made public in October 2023, the report of European Commission of Albania, the progress that Albania has made vis-a-vis approximation with the EU acquis, we see that actually, according to this report, Albania is moderately prepared in the field of education. It is acknowledged that some progress was made with certain agencies in place, but still, there is a lack of vocational training and qualification curriculum. What is more important, according to my reading, is the fact that in the same report, it is highlighted the fact that the public spending on education in 2022 represented 3.2% of GDP of Albania, while the forecast for 2023, according to the same report, and 2024 is 2.9% and 2.8% respectively. So very low, not only comparing to 2022, but also lower than EU average 5%. And of course, I want to stop here because actually I think that there is a lot for discussion and for question and answers if you want later on.
Thank you, Eda, for your enlightening presentation. I would like to stress two things. First, to underline two things: the combination between theoretical approach and of analysis of concrete contexts, and also what seems interesting for me in all this what we are discussing is the distinction, which is basic, I think, between and it's essential, the distinction between education and schooling. Maybe we'll come back to this during the discussion. Now, during the dialogue with the public. And now I give the floor to Professor Naz-Pekka. Please, Nazi.
Good evening, everyone. Hi, good evening. Thank you, Bashkim. Thank you, Eda. Very interesting findings, Ms. Gemi. I would, as the title goes, Education, Equality, and Future of EU Membership, I thank you, Eda, for your analysis, and I will carry on. I think that it would be great if I make a shortcut and I carry on for the third part of the title, which is the future of EU membership. Eda gave us some very good insights on the state of education in Albania and the last part of her analysis, and I will just come to that number that 150% is a huge number, an increase of migrants for educational purposes. As Bashkim introduced me at the beginning of the session, I also am engaged in a project that is currently running in northwestern Albania, in Caucasus. Its primary objective is to actually level things up, so to speak, and help people in that region, especially youngsters, to work towards their future in Albania, not migrate irregularly into the United Kingdom, as this is a project funded by the United Kingdom. So I'm also on the ground with what's actually happening and with a part of that discussion that Ada was highlighting as well. As I said, I will rely less on the first 2 points of the session, and I will concentrate briefly on the EU enlargement with regard to all of this being talked so far. To make it shorter, we all know and we all guess that what the equality in European Union discourse means and how that's been defined. May I just add to the point that we all also know that European Union is founded on the value of respect for human dignity, freedom, democracy, and that is equality as well, the rule of law and respect for human rights. Further on, it is only the European Union discourse goes further by establishing the truth that it is only by investing in education, training, research, development, and innovations that Europe will remain competitive. Education and training can also help reinforce the sustainable development of democracy, and that's a very important point as well, and inclusion as well as safety. I reckon we are all familiar with a new strategic agenda for the EU for 2019-2024, adopted by the European Council on 20th of June 2019, which stresses that member states must step up investment in people skills and education. And then further on that, also the European Pillar of Social Rights, the proclamation of the EU leaders at the 2017 Gothenburg Social Summit established that quality and inclusive education, training, and lifelong learning as its first principle. So, overall, the European Council stressed that education and culture are key to building inclusive and cohesive societies and to sustaining our competitiveness. And identified a number of priority work strands which are in line with the Commission vision for the European education area, which goes into function until 2025. Now, if I just may briefly get back to the last part of the discussion with some quite interesting statistics that just came up, because now we are preparing the budget for, I mean, we have gone through a budget anyway. And as far as the Albanian budget for education is concerned, I went through some very interesting figures. Overall, we see a decrease in budget for education in all sectors of education. In elementary education, that is the 9th year, we see a 9% decrease. In secondary education, we see 8.6%, 33.2% in higher education, and 45.1% in research. So that's a decrease in budget for 2024. That is by Ministry of Education and Sport, which also reported that public spending on education represented 3.2% of GDP. And as Ada rightly said, with a low, I mean, considerably lower than the EU average of 5%. 3.2% of GDP in 2022, whereas the forecast for 23 and 24 is 2.9 and 2.8 respectively. So overall, this is pretty much the picture of Albania in terms of its commitment to education, and also in terms of its commitment to prepare its society in the path to integration within the European Union. Now, let me just briefly go into the notion of into analyzing the notion of some of the problems that the Albania faces in terms of enlargement, in terms of its relationship with European Union. So as we know, Albania is among the 6 Western Balkan countries that have embarked on a journey towards the EU, and it has already initiated accession negotiations. And we also know that in July 2022, after 8 years, because in 2014, it actually got a candidate status for the EU. So it is that after 8 years, Albania finally embarked on this journey of the opening negotiations. Now, enlargement is pretty much part or is joined with the EU foreign policy. So if we talk about the enlargement process of EU, and then if we want specifically to deal with a certain country, which now that is of Albania, we also touch upon the EU European Union foreign policy a bit, just that we get some ideas of what the EU foreign policy has gone and what are the stages of its development. Now, as we all know, European Union countries and European publics have largely defined themselves as a pacifist, or at least so for the last 30, 40 years. But with a huge change in geopolitical terms, that is with the Ukraine war unfolding in its soul, they found themselves in favor of financing the armament of Ukraine and sending military equipment there as well. Now, the biggest or the toughest problem, perhaps, that it can be said on the terms of enlargement, not only within the relationship of Albania and EU, but overall of Western Balkans, it could be said that since the biggest problem perhaps lies in the, if I may term this as a lost credibility of European Union. Now, that's a bit tough to define, but I will sum it up very briefly. Since the Central and Eastern European countries joined the EU in 2004 and 2007, we all see that the process of enlargement has somehow been neglected. Now, it could be said that the Europe's stability, in a way, was taken for granted with the inclusion of Eastern European countries, and then of Romania, Bulgaria as well, so that forming part of kind of circle in a way, always in terms of opposition to Russia. And then it could be said that, as I said, Europe has taken this for granted, its stability. And then we could also delve on that consequently, that this enlargement, then the enlargement was actually pushed further into the distant future. Now, as I said, this has taken its toll, and this toll is in terms of European Union credibility. Further down, EU members remained also silent when some of them, or some of the EU countries blocked accession countries through vetoes that had little or almost nothing to do with accession criteria. Those dramatically undermining the credibility of the process for many Western Balkan countries. We all know the case of Macedonia, for example, that has been blocked in 3 occasions, starting with Greece, and then going on with France, and then finally with Bulgaria now, which is a pretendant in the scene, so to speak. So, if we talk about this lost credibility, then we can also assume that the process also stopped delivering reforms. This in turn reinforced the belief among many skeptics inside and outside Western Balkan countries that the countries in the waiting line were not fit to become members. Now, I'd like to specifically say a few words about the case of Albania, taking part in all this macro picture, so to speak. And Albania, the answer to the question of where Albania's European integration is going cannot be complete without looking retrospectively at the whole dynamics of policies, attitudes, concepts, fluctuations, which are followed by one and the other party in the country's long process of European integration. European integration should not be seen as a one-sided process where one determines stages and obstacles and the other must make the run of overcoming them. By all means, a European integration process, it's a reciprocal rapport or relationship where each side has something to reassess and correct. Many observers know that in this phase of Albania's European integration, there is something not functioning in this relationship. Sometimes the Albanian EU relations have been an empty dialogue, or at least this is an observation that has stood for many years. Which then naturally leads to the dilemma whether the two sides have always understood each other correctly or not. It is Albanian politics more to blame, which has not been as pro-European as it appears, or it is the European Union confused and unrealistic in its concept of treating Albania as a prospective member. Undoubtedly, the main responsibility in the abnormal pace of Albania's integration process in the European Union rests with the Albanian political elite. I think that its arrogant quest for power has sabotaged both its governance and the country, that is Albania, to develop a normal process of reforms and achievement of standards and criteria for integration. But when we talk about, or when we go further down this road of blaming, if I can say so, of Albania, we can, for example, reach out on three points or three examples on this field. We all remember that signing of the Stabilization and Association Agreement of Albania with the European Union, it took, or it was delayed for 3 years. Then the second delay was the award of the status of candidate state to the EU as well. And then the third one, which was the justice reform. The justice reform was also delayed for 3 years, which eventual approval of it actually led to the opening of Albania's accession talks with the European Union. So this is mostly part of, if I can say, it's down to political elites. Confusion, or maybe some would say confusion, or if I can go a bit harder on it, anything, I mean, purposeful orientation towards European Union integration. And although the political elites that govern Albania in the post-communist period have a strategic programmatic orientation of a part in governmental integration in the EU, in practice, in their policies, European integration has not been their top priority. There has always been ugly power struggles in maintaining power, and this has prevailed over the objective over the main objective of Albania's European integration. As a result, the power ambitions of elections have been distorted, reforms have been distorted, and functional democratic institutions, state institutions, have not been built. Since 1990s, numerous programs and reforms were announced for the establishment of the rule of law, and all of these reforms show rather disguised inconsistency of the Albanian political will with the standards and criteria which are required by the European Union. For example, from the viewpoint of an ordinary Albanian citizen, one cannot help but ask the question of why Albanian politics should engage after so many years for the justice reform when this should have been done in the first steps of Albanian transition to democracy. By doing so, this could have avoided this incurable metastasis of high-level official corruption, and why the EU did not remember to demand and impose this reform in the Albanian political class, which obviously was among the most urgent needs of a new democratic state, which we all know that only emerged from a dictatorial form of political system. Now, the delay in passing justice reform is fresh evidence that European integration is not the priority of the main political forces in the country or main political elite. The other blame, I would say, because we should not do a favor to political elite if we only concentrate on that aspect of political life in Albania, goes also to what we term as a civil society. Now, we all know that civil society is a backbone of a democracy, or a functioning civil society, to be honest. As far as the civil society is concerned, the downside is that what in Albania is called civil society has reflected in pretty much the same political fractures, sometimes deciding on the basis of individual interest rather than that of the citizen they were representing of. So we all have this is we all have that theory which goes that it is the civil society is in a way part of political elite, or it is that political elite is actually making the civil society as it is. But that is an open discussion, and it's not the subject of this analysis anyway. So instead of following the path of distancing themselves from political and government as well, it has often happened that what is called, I insist on this term, what is called civil society has become part of it, and is heavily influenced by trends and interests different from the institutions of government or other states. So this is partly what the Albanian, so to speak, side is concerned. But we also mentioned a few of, if I may say, the EU, if I can bluntly say, mistakes in its approach towards Western Balkans, and in particular towards Albania. In the slower rhythms of Albania's European integration process, some mistakes of the European Union itself could not be taken out of consideration. Many observers know that perhaps one of the biggest mistakes was for the EU to align its policy making in regard to integration always with a so-called regional approach thinking. The EU's region group initiatives and organizations have not been able to resolve any bilateral problems or bilateral conflicts in the region. It has always been necessary to direct EU and NATO intervention in the region, both for bilateral and domestic crises. But the gravest mistakes that would I could see that would come out of this EU's course for European integration based on this regional approach has been that of following several phases and cases of double standards attitude. So when I said double standards, I just mentioned the case of Macedonia, and then we also have the case of Albania, and versus let's say the stage where the Bosnia and Herzegovina is, and quite recently Serbia as well. Serbia refused to sign the Stabilization and Association Agreement, which is, to be honest, unprecedented in the EU's relation with the countries that aim to integrate into the EU. Serbia also refused to cooperate with the International War Crimes Tribunal in The Hague. Serbia refused to join EU sanctions against Russia following Russian aggression in Ukraine, and the Serbian leadership has not, to this day, gone to the extent of condemning this aggression as well. So it all goes against the European foreign and security policy, which has been adopted by the EU itself. And then we're also talking about prospective member countries that have to align this foreign policy in line with the ESDP. However, despite all this, Serbia was granted candidate status before Albania, and is the European Union also opened accession talks before Albania. So in a way, we can also see the situation that right now it's going on between the Serbia and Kosovo, and but mainly speaking, it's only mostly the policy of double standards is mostly revolving around these four countries, as I said, Bosnia, Serbia, Kosovo, and Albania, and to a large extent to Macedonia as well, although that in a way that case is closed. So to sum it up, I would say that accelerating the rhythms of Albanians in European integration, it would certainly require the establishment for Albanian political elite of the establishment of European integration as a priority, always over the quest or the battle for power, while on the part of the EU, it would probably, or it would certainly require a new positioning of relations with Albania, sidelining the concept of double standards, and also working heavily on the issue of credibility. I would say that's it from me. I'm not sure if, yeah, that would be it for me. Thank you very much for listening, and I would be happy if you have any questions or anything that can be.
Thank you, Nas. Thank you very much. And I would like to highlight here the connection, the relation that you stressed on between education, what you outlined, the relation between education and European integration, which is not quite evident. It's complex, but it's not evident. Now, we have already several questions from people. We have 4 questions from the audience. And Aladdin, how many minutes do we have? Hello?
It has 23 minutes.
Okay, so let's go quickly to the questions. The first question is by Arben. Don't you think that we have a set number, let's say, of education and a lower number of interest to, not to talk about labor? This question I would, since we have not much time, we will ask first to one of the, so Eda, please, would you like to answer this question?
Can you just repeat it for me?
Yes.
Because it was not quite clear,
Yes.
the meaning of the question.
Don't you think that we have a set number of education and a low number of interest to not talk about labor?
So if I understand correctly, it means that I see or I read behind the lines of this question that probably he or she is asking about if we have more number of probably universities in Albania which do not correspond with the people that have interests in studying there, and how it is connected with labor market. Yes, okay, Arben. So actually, indeed, I mentioned before during my my speech that actually the tertiary education in Albania is actually very not market oriented in a functionalist way, but I mean is left in its own device in order to get reoriented with a very unstable and unregulated educational system in Albania. And of course, we have to keep in mind and to draw a proper balance between, let's say, this shift between 2 different periods or era, before 90s and after 90s, which means that we have a flourishing number of, let's say, private universities, which actually till recently were harshly competing with public university, which is, of course, based on the profit, let's say, orientation, but without having a proper identity in terms of how tertiary education in Albania is going to reflect or to be a mirror of the dynamics of its own economy. So we have no, let's say, our own picture, our own identity in terms of Quo Vadis with our tertiary education. I'm bringing in, or I'm making reference to the East Asia, for instance, that I mentioned before. We have entire countries, I mean, education system, for instance, in India and Pakistan, in Bangladesh, the focus is on IT in order, for their, let's say, graduated students to feed the needs of global market. So their educational market in quota has a clear identity, a clear goal, a clear scope in order to prepare the new generation of IT experts that are going to fill whatever voids and vacuums in world labor market. In Albania, of course, I'm not comparing Albania with, for instance, India or Pakistan or whatever, but from a regional perspective, Albania has no, let's say, something different or something that could be, let's say, would incentivize both Albanian students or potential students, their families, and of course, students probably from abroad, in order to study in Albania, not because of the low quality of education, but because this education or the curricula in general is not properly designed to correspond to the needs of labor market. Of course, you can actually bring in a counter argument. Is there any market need in Albania for a specific labor force or a specific profile or expertise? Of course, labor market in Albania is fragmented, which means that there is no this matching between, let's say, need for workforce and universities that produce or graduate students that could fit the needs that the labor market of Albania has, for instance, which in turn create or generate this vicious circle of Albanian students either studying abroad since the beginning, I mean, since the onset of their tertiary education, or after completing their bachelor studies in Albania, they opt to go, I mean, to continue their master or PhD studies, especially in Europe, or why not somewhere else. On the other hand, it's a very interesting development. And I'd like to illustrate this new development that sometimes we tend to forget or to actually to leave it aside in a way. For instance, I was in Paris last month in OECD meeting on migration. And it was a representative of German Ministry of Interior, and the guy was presenting the new policy of German government vis-a-vis, I mean, recruiting almost 1 million migrants, which correspond to the needs the German market has, I mean, for labor force. And what, let's say, was strike my, let's say, my attention was the fact that he mentioned the rising quota of new migrants from Western Balkans. So actually, we have a formal policy in Germany to recruit, to hire more. They have a quota system of quota in place to hire more highly probably skilled individuals from the West Balkans. And my question towards this guy was why German government, German state has decided to open up the quota for people or individuals from Western Balkans. And one of the answers, the potential answers that never, was answered actually, was given, was the fact that as far as we are, Albania, Bosnia-Herzegovina, I don't know Kosovo, but I'm talking about mostly about Albania and Bosnia-Herzegovina, their educational system, the curricula, is actually equalized with Bologna system. And we know very well that Germany, I mean, the German states, has a specific policy towards, I mean, equalizing on converting Albanian diploma of higher education with the German one, which in a way facilitate the mobility of highly skilled migrants, especially in sectors like, I mean, health professionals or practitioners, in order, or IT, for instance, to work in the German market. So this is a new form, a postmodern form in quota of brain gain, or an organized one, an intentional one towards certain countries that probably are closer, culturally speaking, with Germany. So the cost or benefit is actually weighed out in a more rational way. This is my answer to your question. Of course, there's a huge, or I mean, debate about, but I'd like just to point out two things. An unorganized labor market, translated in an unorganized or, let's say, not a proper curricula that can actually bring together or create this kind of balance of matching between labor market and tertiary education. And of course, the motivation or the pull factors or push factors coming from, especially from European Union, like countries of European Union, as I mentioned, Germany.
Thank you, Eda. Now we have 4 more questions. We have several questions. Let's go quickly because we have a quarter of an hour more. A question from Elena. What can we do to the cases of people going out of Albania? What thing can keep youth from going outside the country when they have a diploma and eager to work, and then nothing when they try to enter in the society? So, Naz, please, would you answer to this question?
Yeah. I think it's a very good question because, as I said previously, I'm engaged in the project that actually deals with exactly with those cases. And based on our research as a project and my research as an individual, the answer is very, very simple, Ellen. It's the youngsters, the youths from that region, from Albania, they have to get the attention from the central government policies. I mean, we can talk for hours and for weeks and for days and for months or whatever, but the answer is very, very simple. As Ada previously mentioned, there's a problem with the curricula. There's a problem with the educational curricula in Albania to some extent, not working in line with the market needs. But I think what we should do is we should offer these people a future, and a future does not consist only based on the diploma, because it means that certain segment of population has no future if they don't have a diploma. But so it's more to that than a diploma. People do not migrate just because they want to go to school. Any person that you ask, they also migrate because they want to do school and they want to finish college and they want to find job there. So in my knowledge, no one has so far said that I want to go to Germany, I want to get a degree and I want to come back. I mean, there's no such a case in my knowledge, as I said, as I deal with this on a daily basis. So the focus should be on the real and serious engagement from the central government toward these pockets, especially in Albania, in corners of Albania, if I can say so.
Thank you, Naz.
I hope I am.
Okay. Thank you, Naz. Now another question sent from iPhone. What politics are now applied to make you stay and improve their education when now that there are many non-professionals in great posts? Eda, would you please answer to this question?
Just to go back to what Naz said, what is missing in Albania is a very, let's say, basic thing, the so-called meritocracy. So if there is no meritocracy, there are no incentives for someone, an individual who wants to pursue its own career trajectory in Albania. So actually there is no way out but just, to pay whatever costs and migrate to another country in order, to pursue a rational, let's say, life. So when it comes to the question, that you actually just read, from my point of view, it's something more systemic. I mean, we cannot, we can talk a lot about what to be done, what's going wrong, what can be improved, but actually, as far as we have no proper, let's say, a functional way of market operation, I mean, of labor market, and we have a tertiary education, which is mostly, let's say, oriented towards not the proper needs of labor market, either local, regional, or European labor market. There is no way out. I see it in a, let's say, in a very gray way, the prospect of, let's say, education system in Albania, always vis-a-vis integration or access to the labor market. If there is no systemic, let's say, revolution or reforms in terms of making the labor market, including here also the public administration, because there is a lot of debate, discussion about how to make the public administration more, let's say, to modernize it in order to attract more people from abroad, from young individuals. But it's not only a matter of salary, it's also a matter of, as I mentioned before, meritocracy. So actually, if there is no a serious effort to reform the entire approach to how, let's say, the systemic one, macro one, I mean, could be actually could be in place, there is no, let's say, a positive answer to whatever question about how to motivate people not to leave Albania. So on the other hand, it's very weird and sometimes ironic to hear that in public speech our leaders, for instance, talk about the freedom of movement. What is happening in Albania now, the so-called, not only so-called, but the phenomenon of brain drain, not a question of freedom of movement. It's a question of surviving. If you have invested in your studies, if you want to have a proper professional life, if you want to change your, let's say, socioeconomic status, of course you have to pursue or to have to make certain steps towards your goals, actually. If the system in place does not actually fit or open your whatever opportunities, then we are talking about instead of education and equality, education inequalities. On the other hand, what is missing is the vocational education, vocational training. I mean, we have universities with some classic curricula, but when it comes to very specific sectors, like I know plumbers or other, let's say, there is a gap when it comes to vocational training.
Thank you, Eda. Now, there is another question from Arben. I would like Naz to answer it. So, like in case of Serbia, it means we have to play bad police in order to be part of the European Union?
Yeah, thank you for your question. Yes, very short answer, Arben. Yes, we have to play bad police. I mean, if you want to delve me into this, the thing is that, as I said previously, the Albanian political mindset, which was largely derived from the political elite, has actually been able to sell this idea of Albania running into a European integration process. But we are now at the stage where we are, which is 2023, and we are way behind of what we thought initially would be our place. And then if we compare ourselves with other countries in the region that has actually gone into that process, the answer is yes, we have to be bad police, because at the end of the day, what we are trying to do is we are trying to be ourselves joining the club. We don't have to fall behind of anything else than this mantra. I think this is a great country and a great nation, and it can do well, better, much better than it actually is doing right now. So in this sense, unless we are further in our national interest and unless we are working towards this, we can't go any further. And that means in this particular context, that means that we have to play bad police. That's why my answer was short. Thank you.
Thank you so much. There is another message. Okay. So any other question? Well, then let's close this session. Thank you very much, Eda. Thank you very much, Naz, and also everybody who followed us, who followed this session. Thank
My
you
pleasure.
and goodbye.
Thank
Bye,
you,
everybody.
Thank you.